You were also a little bit skeptical about this question. I'm not sure that it is something which will be permanent. We'll see it in a few years.
David Pollock, I know that you've done a lot of polls recently
Yes.
at the Washington Institute. Is that something you're researching?
Well, I agree that it's an uncertain question, and I think it deserves a lot of research. But the whole issue is so new that I would have to say, honestly, I don't think there's any serious research that's been done to determine in some scientific way, in some objective way, how much influence Turkey actually can have in the Arab world. We do know that Erdogan is very popular. That we can already see. As a personality in polls from a number of different Arab countries, he's very popular. He's replaced, I would say, thankfully, leaders of Hezbollah or of Iran as one of the more popular figures in Arab society. But whether that actually means a serious bid for leadership of the whole region, that's a completely different question.
One of the acid tests could be coming up soon for Turkey. Dozens of tanks and hundreds of soldiers this Wednesday storming towns and villages near Syria's northwest border with Turkey. We can perhaps take a look at some of those images now. All right, we'll try to show you those latest images, many of them courtesy of amateur video footage. What we have seen in the past months, Mustafa Akyol, are the images as well of all those refugees that have poured over the border into Turkey from Syria. And many guests on this show have wondered aloud whether at some point it's going to be Turkey's job to intervene militarily in Syria. What are your thoughts on that?
That is indeed being discussed in Turkey, but just before moving on to that, just let me add that there has been actually some studies on the Turkish influence or Turkish soft power in the Arab world by a Turkish liberal-leaning think tank called TESEV, and I would suggest that they basically found that Turkish modernity is actually very interesting for Arabs right now because it is a modernity which is more compatible with tradition and religion. And that, comes out with soap operas and all the Turkish influence. But as for Syria, the point you asked, I mean, Turkey has actually, since 2005, Turkey had good relations with Syria. It was a part of Turkey's zero problems with neighbors policy. But when the Arab Spring began, Turkey realized that some of the dictators that it used to be friends are now cracking down on their own people. And I think, to its credit, in Libya they were a bit late to condemn Gaddafi, but in Syria, I think the Turkish government has done a good job in terms of criticizing and ultimately condemning the regime. Although there are good benefits for Turkey in terms of being friendly with the regime.
And on that point made of whether or not it's going to, in the end, be Turkey's job if the problem near the border becomes too intense, whether it's going to be Turkey's job to be the one to intervene militarily. What are your thoughts?
Well, that is not much of an option here, which at least it's not discussed. I mean, we are very disturbed about what's happening in Syria, but like an invasion of Syria, I think, is not at least on the Turkish public debate. And I think something like that can be only possible if there is some international backing. And that's something that Turkey wants to do, apparently. But also Turkey is concerned about the potential refugees which might flow in from the border. And that's why Turkey for a long time tried to be a negotiator between the government and the Syrian opposition. Although now it is actually very much, it has lost its hope when it comes to the government. But just don't expect this Turkish military operation against Syria anytime soon.
Eli Abdelhey, how do you rate Erdogan's job when it comes to Syria?
I would like to respond to 2 points about Erdogan's actions. In politics, there is no action in politics without any self-interest behind it. So what we think from Palestinian point of view, before going to the Syrian part, we believe that Palestinians have the right, and all the people in the region have the right to have their own states and live peacefully with all their neighbors. Israelis and Palestinians and all the people. So, and you know, in Lebanon we have about 500,000 Palestinians. We want to help them go back home and live peacefully with all these.
And on the issue of Syria,
So the Erdogan action must be in this direction if there is an action. From the Syrian part, on the Syrian part, you know, today, 29 years ago, we are commemorating day by day, day to day, the assassination of President Bashir Gemayel, assassinated by the Syrian regime. So we are well positioned to talk about Syrian regime, and also has imprisoned Samir Jaja, Dr. Samir Jaja.
And how do you think
for
Erdogan
11
has
years.
done in the past 6 months? This Thursday is going to be the 6 months since the uprising began. How do you think Turkey's response has been?
I think the Turkish response is very political, let's say, till this point. We are seeing that let's say, we support at everyone the people to defend their rights to live in democratic country, and all of us are seeing what's happening in Syria. But real actions till now are very, let's say, limited, and we are seeing that these civilians killed by the regime day by day without any, let's say, real action on the ground. And we believe that installing democratic regimes in all the countries will install a lasting peace in the region.
For the region.
For the region. And I think that what we can do in this direction must be consolidated to create this kind of democratic regime by respecting the people's decision. They want to decide for themselves.
Gil
I think
Mahali?
we're all a bit Orientalists when we discuss Turkey. If Erdogan was a Western leader, he would be dead meat today. A French foreign minister was kicked out of political life because she was too close to Tunisia. Erdogan was even closer to Gaddafi and took a long time to respond in Libya. He took some time to realize what's happening in Syria, and yet we think that he's a marvelous statesman. So usually we think of them like we thought of the Russian leaders in the 60s or 70s. Everything the Americans are doing is a huge mistake. Everything the Russians are doing is finely calculated and is a part of a huge ingenious scheme, and so I think we have the same. I think he's quite mediocre. He has excellent cards, and I think he's
So what could he?
his
What
character
what could he do
as a
differently?
as a star.
What should he be doing on Syria then?
No, I think he's doing what he should, but we mustn't forget that he didn't start yesterday. I mean, in May 2010, the Turkish army and the Syrian army were doing maneuvers together, okay? And 9 months later, they discovered that they might, in the future, be called to intervene militarily in this state. So there's no huge insight or foresight, and the fact that he was so enlivered, so intoxicated by the success of the Gaza flotilla that he accepted the Human Rights Award from Gaddafi 2 months before before the Benghazi revolution starts. I mean, in any modern Western country, this guy would be a joke. But he can afford to do mistakes. He has the credit that an Israeli prime minister can maybe dream about, an American president can dream about. We just don't judge them, and we don't judge them like we judge our own leaders.
David Pollock, do you agree that it's just a question of being dealt, as Gil was saying, an excellent hand?
I agree with some of what Gil just said. I think Western leaders also get away with a lot of big mistakes.
That's true.
And so it's not really, it seems to me, a double standard applied to Turkey. But I want to comment particularly about Syria, because here I have an even sharper criticism of Erdogan's policy. I don't think even now that Turkey has really abandoned Hafez al-Assad, Bashar al-Assad, and his brutal, murderous regime. Even now, Turkey is hedging its bets. It continues to trade heavily with Syria, even as they support meetings for the opposition in Syria. And at the same time, Turkey has arrested the one Syrian military defector who sought refuge in Turkey. So they are talking nicely about democracy and the Arab Spring.
He did say in his speech, though, that Assad is not credible.
It's just words. This actual Turkish policy, when it comes to trade, when it comes to political asylum for high-level Syrian dissidents, is hypocritical. And I think even now, Turkey under Erdogan is following a hypocritical policy of talking about the need for Assad to reform, but not doing anything about it.
Mustafa Akyol, do you agree?
I mean, I think hypocrisy is a universal feature of states.
I agree with that too. Yeah.
But I don't think Turkey is doing terribly bad when it comes to the Arab Spring. I mean, nobody foresaw the Arab Spring. I mean, when Erdogan was taking a prize from Gaddafi, he could not have known that the Arab Spring would start soon and he would start killing his own
The French
people.
Foreign Minister
Similarly,
neither, when she
Sarkozy
went on
did not.
vacation.
Similarly, Sarkozy, when he was offering help to the dictatorship in Tunis, he wasn't aware that he was playing probably the wrong card. I mean, leaders make mistakes. Turkey makes mistakes too. But when it comes to Syria, I would say, well, I mean, as for having still trade with Syria, well, Turkey believes in trade, and Turkey hasn't cut trade relations with Israel either. I mean, trade is the golden, if you will, calf of the Turkish foreign policy, and it's a very trading country, and there won't be any problem with trade with any of the countries. But I think in terms of putting political pressure and political criticism of the Syrian regime, I think Turkey is not doing too bad. And as for political asylum, well, I don't know that particular case, but Syrian opposition meets in Istanbul freely all the time, and they find support from the Turkish government. Yes, maybe it should be more, but I think also Turkey has to care about instability in Syria, how it influences the Kurdish situation in Turkey, how it influences the situation with refugees. But having taken all that into account, I think it's fair to say that Turkey is not doing too badly when it comes to Syria in terms of its principles.
One very short comment.
Very brief, both because we're almost out of time.
We just have to imagine what would happen if Israel would have not knocked out the military nuclear installation in Syria 4 years ago in September.
It's a critical question, interfering into another country's affairs. We have suffered in Lebanon for 30 years from these interferences. But also we have to pay attention to what the people want. We want them to be. We need to be very attentive to their action and to their evolution. So it's the people's decision at the end of the day, not external forces to
It'll be up to each country to sort it out. We're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you very much, Eli Abdelhey. I want to thank Gil Mihaly, David Pollock. I want to thank Merve Ozdem Irkiran for joining us, and I want to thank Mustafa Akyol for being with us from Istanbul, and thank you for joining us for the France 24 debate. Stay with us. Coming up next, it's time for Business. That's hosted by Tom Burgess Watson.